From here, we switch gears immediately to look at an equally important issue: 15% tariff on petrol imports, which looks like it's sure to come. I guess is already on standby, and Kelly has this one.
Absolutely. So let's cross over live now to the nation's capital, Abuja studios there, where energy experts and consultant Mr. Bode Showumi joins us live on the program. Mr. Showumi, thank you indeed for agreeing to talk to us here on the program. I'm not sure where exactly you stand. Are you for this or you're against this 15% import tariff? Because yes, we understand it will increase our production or reduce our imports level to about 80%, but the fear is that this is going to further put a burden on Nigeria as inflationary prices would definitely skyrocket. We hear that perhaps pump price may be increased by maybe 100 or 150 naira.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, irrespective of whatever divide that you are, except you're a direct beneficiary, you first want to wear the cap of the man on the street. In simple terms, the tariff necessitates that the people who are going to bear it are the final consumers, which is basically you and I in some sense. So to that extent, yeah, there may be some concerns and all that, but that's where the big but is. What is the purpose or what is the thinking, the ethos behind the increase? If we get it correctly, based on the memo that was submitted by the taxman to the president, the whole idea was some kind of protective cover for the local manufacturing. There is a lot of argument on that, depending on which side of the divide you are, whether you are free market versus protectionism, whether you are for grow Nigeria at the expense of import and all that. Those are a different set of arguments. But the core purpose of it is that it is believed that this tariff is going to help local refining. So in simple terms, we are expecting that the local refiners are going to maintain their own cost, while those who are importing are going to have to be determined, they're going to determine other costs. What it should not lead to is the elimination of options, in which case that will be a monopolistic market and with all the attendant effects of monopoly.
But Mr. Showumi, let's be clear on where you particularly stand, because your explanation doesn't quite get us to the direction where you are. Would it be protectionist or free market as far as this policy is concerned?
Okay, so first of all, I'm a consultant, so my job is to analyze the issues and then people will make up their minds. So if I'm relating to a CEO, I'm advising somebody's government, my job basically is to say, these are the core issues, and then you can decide really where you stand on it. So it's my own personal opinion really is not critical. What is important is to break down the issues in a way that the viewer and the man on the street can look at it and everybody can make up their minds. So if I'm going to explain it again or put it in a different way, at the core of this is the necessity or the desire to protect those that are refining. And that has meant that the man on the street is going to put some amount of sacrifice to ensure that the Nigerian refiners get more stability and get more protection for their business. In simple terms, we're expecting them to retain their own price, even as the prices of those that are importing are skyrocketing. So that will also look at how much local production is really available from the local refining versus the one that is being imported. So those are some of the things that this will lead to.
All right. So, well, some Nigerians are wondering why it does appear that imported fuel are more expensive, are cheaper than those refined domestically, especially some, would say Dangote, for instance, is operating in a free trade zone area. So why does it appear that fuels imported is perhaps cheaper than those refined domestically?
I think that's a business issue. So at the root of that will be cost of operations. I mean, I don't know so much about the operational cost within the refinery, that's within the Dangote refinery and all that. But basically, refining is a global business. So there's a range for which the cost of refining will be. There may be some other issues, other factors that they'll look at. Maybe because they're a new refinery, they need to pay up debt, they need to pay up loans and all that. Maybe those are factors. But those are reasons only those operating the refinery can actually speak to. We can only speculate, we can only analyze based on the information that is available in the public domain. But to be honest, if the cost is higher locally, it is an operational issue. It has nothing to do with external factors.
Yeah.
But the point is that the PIA, as it stands, still makes room for importation. And as at the last check, even in the last 1 year, reports are to the effect that Nigeria is still importing petrol to the tune of 613 million liters in 1 year. So the concern is that it looks as if it's going to get worse before it gets better. What are your projections and your concerns in that regard about the pump price of petrol? And if that is the case, clearly, has the policy been well thought out?
Okay, so first of all, importation is a global business. The U.S. refines, as in they produce 13 times the amount that we produce in terms of crude oil. Yet they still import. I think about 2 or 3 months ago, it was a public record that the Dangote refinery itself exported finished products to the U.S. One of the reasons why there must be a room for importation is because of free market and to allow for those who are local to come up with innovative and competitive ways. So in simple terms, at the moment, cost of production locally may be higher for the Dangote refinery, but it is incumbent upon them to look for cheaper ways to come up with innovative mechanisms to ensure that their production cost goes down. Protectionism alone is not going to save them. And that is basically the whole concept about free market, and that is why everywhere in the world there is some liberty in that sense. In terms of things getting better, things getting worse before they get better, that is a fact that all of us have to deal with when it comes to reforms. Everywhere in the world where there's been reforms, significant reforms that turn around people, it had been like that, whether it was China in the 70s, whether it was Britain in the 70s, China in the 80s, Brazil in the 80s, they went through very significant, painful issues. But it is not so much as the current feeling at the moment or the current pain at the moment, but the end game. In other words, what are we expecting this to lead to? Because if the local industries are protected and the local industries are not pulling up their socks, they're not being innovative, they're not reducing their costs, they're not trying to be competitive, we're just going to end up with a subsidy that would exist, until there's another crisis and another set of reforms.
But can the local industries be innovative on their own, reduce costs on their own? They're working amid the current realities in the market. They're buying crude at the price that the federal government offers, and amid all of the power issues that we have. So the issues you're referring to, they're not in the control of the local refiners.
So that's the entrepreneurial spirit, and I'm speaking because I also run a business. There's a difference between being an employee and being an entrepreneur, and this is all over the world. So when you even check the history of the oil and gas business, the oil and gas business, which was basically enshrined into the structure we know it by the Shell Corporation as well as the Rockefeller, which became ExxonMobil and Co., they didn't develop the industry based on government support. On the contrary, they developed the industry contrary to market forces and contrary to support. And you can say that for anybody. Even the Dangote group itself, they developed their business in sugar, in cement, not necessarily because of everybody liked them, but because they were pursuing goals. So there are entrepreneurship goals. And those entrepreneurship goals are things that exist within the forces of demand and supply. So it is within those difficult circumstances that you eke out an agenda, that you eke out innovation, that you actually stabilize. So what I'm saying is not guesswork. It is just basically that it is a responsibility of a business to innovate, to survive, so that it can flourish. Because when it does not innovate, when it does not survive, when its prosperity is based on external factors, then it is not sustainable. For it to be sustainable, the circle of profitability must come from within itself. And that historically is the nature of business. So yes, I agree that there should be the protectionism for the local industry. But the protectionism is not the end goal. The protectionism is there so that the local industry can innovate and become competitive. So when it innovates and it becomes competitive, then it can now start to compete globally.
And of course, we have these modular refineries in Edo, Rivers, and Imo states. Well, clearly, from your body language, I'm not sure you're very optimistic that this will work because we've been down this road before, Mr. Shewumi. This policy takes effect in 10 days, November 21. And it's coming at a time where the phrase subsidy is gone 2 years after has put Nigerians in a lot of hardship. I hope you can hear me. It has put Nigerians in a lot of hardship. So in terms of the timing of this policy, do you think that the government has gotten it rightly to take this to Nigerians at this time?
Okay, so there are competing forces or competing interest groups at the moment. So if you ask the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, is welcome. If you ask the refiners, particularly the Dangote group, some people are probably dancing. But for everything, there's a push and a pull. In terms of the economic issues of the policy itself, we have to leave that to the economics, who are probably better experts in defining how to interact with the macroeconomic issues. But the issue in terms of the profitability, the survival, and the stability of the local industry as enshrined by or as exemplified by the Dangote Refinery is such that it is a temporary relief, which is very much like the crude for Naira. It is a temporary relief. But there is a responsibility on the people who are beneficiaries of the relief that for the period that this relief is available to them, they owe it to Nigerians who are actually paying for the relief to innovate, to come up with additional ways for them to be competitive without needing external help. That is a big responsibility. And this is not core energy per se. This falls within geopolitics, it falls within the business decisions. It's not pure engineering to that sense. So they must come up with ways to ensure that they compete, and it's not that after about 9 months or another 1 year, we want to increase the rate from 15% to 20% to protect local refineries again.
Well, it's a tall order there. It's a tough task that you hand to the, local refineries, and the test of the policy would only show how they survive if there are no other alternative measures from the ministry and the relevant agencies to ensure that they are protected in terms of pricing. And that takes me to my next question. You mentioned earlier, that perhaps Dangote would be rejoicing being a local refiner, a domestic refiner. But the refinery itself is set to be in a free trade zone, which means that according to, industry watchers and the policies in place, the products from there are imported. So will the 15% petrol import tariff apply to Dangote as well? And if it does not, should the petrol importers be rightly raising eyebrows and asking questions of the NMDPRA and the federal government why the policy is not applying to Dangote Refinery?
So, to be honest, in terms of the effective implementation of what is happening within the free trade zone, Dangote Refinery has been enjoying the best of two worlds, and that has been exemplified in a number of issues. But it is incumbent upon those who are saddled with the responsibility for managing the free trade zone and for enforcing laws, which in this case is the tax laws and all that, to do their job, to do their work. In terms of regulation, what the regulator's responsibility is in terms of the policy is not so much as an implementation of the 15%, that's the NMDPRA. That is more within the ambit of the FIRS and those who are responsible for collecting tariffs at the border. So there are a whole range of government agencies who need to work in tandem to ensure that this thing is actually effected. As to whether the Dangote refinery itself will be saddled, will have to take responsibility of that 15%, I don't fully know, because I don't fully know the details of the conditions that are available at the free trade zone. So it has to be somebody who knows a bit more in terms of whether there are concessions for new, for pioneer industries and all those kind of things to come. But from the fact that, from the information on the grapevine that they actually lobbied or influenced that, I want to believe that it's not affecting them. So that should be on the positive side for them.
Well, it's a fair question to ask, but whether they lobbied it or not, if the policy had been well thought out and if it will, apply to all. The most important thing is that we are now a domestic refining nation. And the question that Nigerians continue to ask is, where are the benefits in terms of pricing of petroleum products? Speaking of which, how much do you project that Nigerians will be buying petrol for upon implementation of this policy, well, according to reports, by November the 21st?
Okay, well, I wouldn't know the exact cost that it will take, because some of the costings are business decisions. In fact, at the moment, there are indications that some of the pricing are not exactly profitable for some of the operators. So there are people that are running at a loss at the moment. However, having said that, if there is a 15% tariff increase, it means that at the minimum, there must be a 15% markup on the cost. If there's a 15% markup on the cost, because of the nature of petrol, it means the whole transportation sector will have some kind of increase, which means that the cost, the logistics cost of delivering the product to the last mile is also going to increase. So it's not a simple interest or a simple issue of it just being on the costs of importation. It's going to be a compound issue because it affects all the supply chain issues. So at the end, maybe 15, maybe 20, maybe 30% increase. Those are decisions for those who are importing it to decide upon. But we will say at the minimum, maybe 15 to 18% increase at the minimum.
And that would be 1,200 naira, 1,100 naira per liter.
For Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, for those in the interland, it should be more than that.
Wow. Mr. Showmi, so I was just trying to do the math a bit. So if via that 15%, it does means the government will generate about maybe 1 trillion naira over a span of 12 months. So I wonder perhaps how you think levies generated from that tariff can be used, especially considering complementary social relief measures. How would you advise the government to channel that money, 1 trillion naira, over a space of 12 months?
Okay, for me, I'm speaking purely based on the progress of the industry. Maybe there should be some center on innovation within the downstream sector. Somebody to actually look at, maybe in combination with the universities, to look at ways for which our refining efforts can be cheaper, for which technology and solutions can be. Some kind of innovative center will be very useful to be funded by that. In terms of the direct relief to people, there has always been a lot of efforts at that. The primary challenge with that is the corruption and the delivery of it. As recent, there is a lot of relief efforts and strategies targeted for the CNG. I'm not so sure an appreciable amount of people within the populace can attest to that, even though people do attest to that. So usually when it comes to relief of those kinds to each individual, it has not been known to work. So there has to be some kind of way in which the funding has to go into something that is policy driven, such that the businesses themselves will have to reduce costs. You see, the solution to it, the long-term solution, is cost reduction. The reason why the Dangote refinery is patriotic is the fact that the Nigerian identifies the refinery and its efforts with cost reduction. And until they start to feel that cost reduction across board, that benefit will not be seen. So efforts needs to look at ways to help these people improve their operations. They need to look at policies that will help them to improve their work. But the responsibility of improvement and all that, the energy to actually make progress, lies on the companies, the refineries themselves. So policies can only do so much.
All right.
Because a policy, for example, is like the white lines on the road. You can have the best tarred road, you can have the best white line, but if you have a drunken driver, there will still be accidents.
Yeah.
So policies have its limitations, and we must know that.
Well, one thing is certain, this policy will indeed mark a significant shift in Nigeria's energy sector and Nigeria's economic plan as well. But we must leave it here, and thank you indeed for analysis on the program. Mr. Bode Sowunmi is an energy expert as well as a consultant. Thank you indeed for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much. The pleasure is mine.
All right, let's take a moment, everyone. When we come back, we're going to switch gears as we get into our final leg of our conversation here on The Morning Brief. And guess what? Nigeria's education sector gets our attention next. Please stay with us.